Steph Curry's gaze, fixed on Draymond Green during a hollow timeout and a 28-point drubbing by the Lakers, has ignited a firestorm online, leaving the basketball world asking a single, heavy question. Is this the moment Steph finally decided he wants Draymond out of Golden State? We are talking about a brotherhood that has weathered storms for 14 seasons, but the ice looks like it is finally cracking. To understand the gravity of that stare, we cannot just look at the game. We have to examine the seismic events of the last month that have piled untold pressure onto this storied relationship. So, we are going to dissect exactly what transpired during that crushing loss to the Lakers, the tension that precipitated it, and what this signals for the twilight of the Curry-Green era in the Bay. The stage was set on Saturday, March 1st, 2026, with the Warriors hosting the Los Angeles Lakers at the Chase Center. Luka Doncic was a force of nature, tallying 26 points, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds. LeBron James, timeless as ever, chipped in 22 points, 9 assists, and 7 boards as the Lakers completely dismantled a depleted Golden State squad en route to a 129-101 victory. It wasn't just a loss. It was a non-event. The competitive spirit seemed to have evaporated from the building long before the final buzzer sounded. But the box score is forgotten. The only thing that matters, the reason we are dissecting this moment, is what transpired in the huddle during a single, innocuous timeout. Context is key here. The Warriors were devoid of firepower. Stephen Curry was sidelined for his 10th consecutive game, nursing that troublesome right knee, while the newly acquired Kristaps Porzingis was out sick, leaving the team rudderless. So there was Curry, not as the assassin on the floor, but as a spectator in street clothes, confined to the bench, watching his legacy get battered. In the midst of that gloom, a video captured by Instagram user OB Benson926 surfaced, highlighting a fleeting interaction that fans instantly seized upon as evidence of a deeper fracture. The footage frames a helpless Curry, dressed in civilian wear, sitting on the sidelines while the chaos of a blowout unfolds around him. During that humiliating 129-101 defeat, you see Draymond Green, ever the vocal leader, animating the huddle, while Curry appears entirely detached from the speech. While Green is shouting, gesturing, trying to ignite a spark, Curry is seemingly miles away, staring into the middle distance, offering only the faintest, most obligatory nod. The clip was amplified by Gen 30 and rocketed across the ecosystem via full-court pass, captioned with that ominous distinct phrase, "Steph Curry watching Draymond Green," followed by the telling eyes emoji. Once that visual hit the timeline, the narrative spiraled out of control, turning a moment of fatigue into a headline of betrayal. The consensus among the NBA faithful is that Steph Curry's patience has finally evaporated, a theory fueled entirely by a few seconds of video that circulated on Sunday. However, we need to take a breath and analyze what the lens actually captured before we write the obituary for this dynasty. Curry is physically present but competitively paralyzed. He is forced to watch his teammate try to rally the troops in a game that was already lost to history. It was his posture, the 1,000-yard stare, the lack of engagement, that weak affirmation that the public latched onto as proof of internal decay. The internet, in its rush to judgment, declared this the smoking gun. Curry is finished with Draymond. He wants him gone, and the greatest duo of their generation is effectively over. But what is the nuance here? You had Guy Santos logging 14 points on 6 of 12 shooting, grabbing 4 rebounds and 2 assists, trying to stop the bleeding. In 27 minutes of action during that 129-101 beatdown, the Warriors' offense looked completely disjointed, struggling to find any rhythm. They were being systematically dismantled by the Lakers, staring down the barrel of a 28-point deficit that felt twice as large. The team's offensive rating plummeted to 105.1. And Green? In 24 minutes, he managed just 7 points and carried the burden of a team worst plus-minus of -30. Let that sink in. Draymond finished the night with 7 points and was a -30 in the box score. That is not the kind of performance that commands attention in a huddle, nor is it a statistic that strengthens one's argument for leadership. Put yourself in Steph's shoes, sitting helpless on the bench, down 28, watching your oldest ally speechify while the scoreboard screams defeat. How are you supposed to react? What is the appropriate face for that disaster? Should he be cheering? Should he be feigning enthusiasm for a pep talk when the team is down 25 points? The interpretation depends entirely on the story you want to tell. And right now, the internet is telling a story of separation. But before we accept a single timeout clip as the definitive declaration that Steph Curry wants Draymond Green exiled, we have to widen the lens to the entire turbulent year of 2026. This tension did not manifest in a timeout huddle. The seeds were sown weeks before the ball was even tipped in this game. To truly grasp why that video struck such a nerve, you have to revisit the boardroom drama of early February 2026. Because the reality is, the Golden State Warriors front office made a genuine attempt to trade Draymond Green and end his tenure in the Bay Area. It is no secret now that the organization had Draymond Green's name in active, serious trade negotiations. Leading up to Thursday's deadline, ESPN sources confirmed that his 14-year legacy was on the chopping block. A report corroborated by Anthony Slater on February 3rd, 2026. The Warriors weren't just politely listening to inbound inquiries about Green. They were the ones aggressively picking up the phone. General Manager Mike Dunleavy and owner Joe Lacob have been transparent about their obsession with landing Giannis Antetokounmpo to extend the championship window, and in the pursuit of that white whale, Green's name was floated as a key component in the framework of packages offered to the Milwaukee Bucks. The target was the Greek Freak. The cost was the heart and soul of the Warriors' defense. It was a cold calculation to match the money. To make the finances work, the Warriors had to shed salary. Either the injured Jimmy Butler, owed $56.8 million, or Green, at $27.6 million next season. Green represented the smaller financial hurdle, a contract that is far easier to redirect to a third team to facilitate the blockbuster. Moreover, unlike Butler, Green is currently healthy and capable of impacting a contender immediately. It came down to simple, brutal math. Green's contract was the cleaner asset to move. Steve Kerr even admitted he had a difficult conversation with Draymond on Monday about the swirling rumors. This marks perhaps the first time in their storied history that the foundation has truly trembled, leaving everyone to wonder if the end is finally here. Steve Kerr admitted that in his entire tenure, this was the solitary moment Draymond's name actually floated in the ether of trade rumors, and he wanted us to really sit with the weight of that reality. Consider the odyssey Kerr has navigated with this squad, the euphoric peaks, the crushing valleys, the suspensions, the Kevin Durant soap opera, and every storm in between. Through it all, Draymond Green was the untouchable heart. Until now. This marked the absolute first instance where his departure moved from impossible to probable. While Kerr and Stephen Curry have long envisioned Green hanging up his jersey in the Bay as a lifer, the cold calculus of business belongs to Joe Lacob and Mike Dunleavy Jr. As the front office scrambled to re-engineer the roster for one last crusade, Green wasn't just unguarded. He was on the block, and Kerr looked him in the eye and gave him the truth. Following a defeat against the Sixers on that Tuesday, the gravity of the situation hit home, and Green faced the press, openly confessing that he might have just walked off the Warriors' hardwood for the final time. "I have put in 13 and a half years here," Green reflected. "That is a tenure that eclipses probably 98% of anyone who has ever laced them up in this league. For a kid out of Saginaw, Michigan, I don't know if the road ends at 13 and a half, but if this is it, it has been one hell of a ride." The dialogue with Kerr stripped away any denial the trade threat was tangible, and it was so imminent that Green prepared his own son on the drive to the arena, warning him that their lives might change overnight. He had to have that father-son talk because the writing was on the wall. Yet when the dust finally settled, the trigger wasn't pulled. Clarity arrived Wednesday evening when it became obvious Green was staying, simply because the franchise chose a different path, shipping Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield to Atlanta in exchange for Kristaps Porzingis. Golden State secured their blockbuster acquisition to shake things up, though it wasn't the Giannis Antetokounmpo miracle that fans had been dreaming about. They landed Porzingis to bolster the front line instead, but the emotional scar tissue regarding Green's security had already formed. "It got incredibly tense as the clock ticked down, but it is what it is," Green admitted later. "We move forward, though I can tell you, that feeling isn't something I ever want to normalize." That was Draymond's raw reaction once the deadline passed. But then the organization decided to execute a fascinating pivot in the public narrative. Even though the Warriors overhauled their lineup, General Manager Mike Dunleavy Jr. attempted to rewrite history, insisting that Draymond Green was never legitimately on the table. Facing a storm of speculation, Dunleavy stood firm and flatly rejected the idea that Green was close to an exit, stating, "I would walk that back a little bit." Regarding the rumors, he claimed Green's name was simply not part of the conversations, and then owner Joe Lacob doubled down on that sentiment, claiming Green was never discussed in any trade package. Mike was 100% accurate in his statement. Lacob told Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard, attempting to close the book on the drama. We know Lacob took heat for that stance. It looked like defensive posturing, but this is where the story gets murky, as Green's own version of events painted a vastly different reality. Opening up on his own podcast, the veteran forward conceded that the pursuit of Giannis created a genuine uncertainty regarding his standing on the team. When the wins aren't stacking up, everything becomes possible. Green philosophized, acknowledging the ruthless nature of the sport. He detailed specific exchanges with Dunleavy and Kerr that, while not definitive, forced him to look in the mirror and accept a future where he wasn't wearing blue and gold. So, we are left to wonder, amidst the conflicting narratives between the locker room and the suite level, who was actually speaking the truth? ESPN sources reported active trade discussions involving Green, and the player himself confirmed those talks happened. Yet the GM and owner maintain it was all a mirage. What remains undeniable is that the conversation existed in the ether, and that uncertainty forms the backdrop for everything unraveling now, including that infamous timeout. But here is the brutal reality regarding Draymond Green in the year 2026 that no amount of corporate spin can disguise. When Stephen Curry is not sharing the floor with him, the analytics are not just poor, they are catastrophic. We aren't talking about a minor dip. Stephen Curry has been sidelined with runner's knee since January 30th, leaving a massive void. The four-time champion, who is set to turn 38 in just 2 weeks, is still the heartbeat of this franchise. He remains the sole offensive engine of this aging roster, leading the way with 27.2 points per night, but he has been absent for over a month now. During that stretch of absence, the data regarding Draymond Green has crystallized into a very harsh indictment. With Curry stuck in street clothes, Green has devolved into an offensive liability, becoming virtually unplayable on that end of the floor. Throughout February, Golden State's offensive rating plummeted to an apocalyptic 98.7 with Green playing, but without him, it skyrocketed to a blistering 120. You need to let that statistic breathe for a moment, because a 21.3-point swing per 100 possessions is almost incomprehensible. We are talking about the chasm between an elite, championship-level offense and one of the absolute worst units in the entire NBA. And that drop-off is tied exclusively to Draymond Green's presence. Anthony Slater of ESPN did not mince words when analyzing the situation, suggesting we are witnessing a decline in real time. Offensively, it is becoming painfully clear that his value is inextricably tied to Steph, Slater noted on the Warriors stock report. It is impossible to ignore the evidence, especially with Steph out of the lineup. The simple truth is they have been performing significantly better when Draymond sits. If you drill down into the game-by-game logs, the story remains exactly the same, backing up the broader trends. Lower back soreness sidelined Green for victories against the Denver Nuggets and Memphis Grizzlies, and in those contests, the Warriors posted offensive ratings of 120.8 and 134.3. Yet, sandwiched between those explosive performances was a loss to the New Orleans Pelicans, where the rating cratered to 103.8 with Green logging 32 minutes. The pattern is undeniable. When Green sat, the offense found its rhythm. But when Green played, the machine stalled out completely. Then you have the Lakers matchup, the game overshadowed by that viral timeout video where they suffered a 129-101 blowout. The offensive rating was a dismal 105.1 during Green's 24 minutes, where he finished with 7 points and a team worst plus-minus of -30. Draymond Green has never been the type of athlete whose contributions you can quantify just by glancing at a stat sheet. His true worth has always existed in the white space between the numbers. He carved out a Hall of Fame career through sheer defensive grit, elite playmaking, and a vocal leadership style that essentially made him a coach in a jersey. Standing shoulder to shoulder with Steph Curry, he secured 4 world titles while serving as the unshakable defensive spine of a dynasty. You only need to look at the hardware, the Defensive Player of the Year trophy from 2017 and 9 separate all-defensive team selections to understand the sheer magnitude of the shadow he cast over the league. Yet, no one is here to debate the history books or question the legacy Green has already cemented. The pressing inquiry today is far more uncomfortable. What exactly can he bring to the table at 35 years old when Stephen Curry isn't standing right there beside him? Throughout this current campaign, Green has actually logged more minutes, appearing in 49 contests compared to Curry's 39. He has been physically available, suited up, and present on the hardwood, but showing up isn't the problem here. The fundamental issue facing the organization isn't availability. It is the diminishing returns on his actual impact. Over the course of 137 career games without Stephen Curry, Draymond Green has averaged just 7.9 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 5.7 assists per night. On paper, those figures might seem serviceable for a role player, but if you trust your eyes and the deeper advanced analytics, the story unfolding in 2026 is drastically different and far more concerning. It has become painfully obvious that Curry's gravitational pull is the sole variable determining whether Green is a vital cog in the machine or an active liability dragging the Golden State Warriors down. Bachelor of Arts analyst Mark Willard recently peeled back the layers of this dilemma even further while speaking on the Willard and Dibs program. He posited a radical theory. If Curry is sidelined, Green should be parked right next to him. Rather than agonizing over rotation patterns or minute allocation, the solution might be much simpler. Instead of debating whether he belongs in the starting lineup or should anchor the second unit, maybe the rule should be that if Steph doesn't suit up, the conversation ends there. You simply sit out. And when pressed for the reasoning behind such a harsh stance, Willard pointed directly to the alternative option on the roster. When the system operates without Steph, the team actually flows better without Draymond, not because of age, considering Al is 5 years his senior, but because of spacing. Al provides the shooting threat the offense desperately craves. At 40 years old, Al Horford opens up the geometry of the court in a way that Green simply cannot replicate at this stage of his career. When Horford slots in at the 5 spot replacing Green, opposing defenses are forced to respect his perimeter game, dignifying a shooter knocking down 38.3% of his attempts. Since his return around Christmas, that gravity has cleared runway lanes for drivers and cutters, expanding the offensive map. It is a structural reality that even head coach Steve Kerr has had to acknowledge. The entire texture of the game shifts when Steph is absent. You have to understand, these two men have spent 14 years weaving a telepathic connection that few duos in sports history ever achieve. That two-man synergy has been the foundation of our entire offensive identity. When you remove Steph from that equation, it fundamentally alters the calculus of how defenses approach us. And the person who suffers the most from that vacuum, more than anyone else on the roster, is Draymond. When the architect of the dynasty admits that the separation affects Draymond the most, it speaks volumes. The Curry-Green partnership stands as one of the most formidable alliances the Bachelor of Arts has ever witnessed. But a partnership, by its very definition, demands the presence of both parties. When one half of that whole is removed, you have to ask yourself, what is actually left behind? Now, this is the moment where we need to pause and address the headline directly, because there is a massive chasm between a viral moment caught during a timeout and the actual spoken truth. We have to distinguish between the narrative the internet has projected onto Stephen Curry's emotions and the words that have actually left the man's mouth. When you look at the public record, the stance is undeniable. Since 2012, there have certainly been moments where Draymond Green's volatile intensity has tested the patience of every single person in the Warriors ecosystem. That includes the franchise's comm center, Stephen Curry, a man known for his prudence. Yet, not once has Curry ever entertained the thought of endorsing a split from Green. Reporters have probed Curry with this question from every conceivable angle over the years, and every single time, his response has remained unwavering. "I refuse to even entertain that narrative," Curry has said. He has faced situations where the world wanted to criticize and pile on, but he has always stood tall and taken responsibility for his actions throughout the years. When specifically asked to estimate how many banners the Warriors would have hung in the rafters without Green's contributions, Curry didn't hesitate for a split second. 0, 0, 0, he declared, adding that the goal is to squeeze one final championship out of what they have left. Not one ring, not two. 0 championships without Draymond Green. That is the gospel according to Stephen Curry. Now entering their 14th campaign as teammates, the longest active tenure for a duo in the N. Bachelor of Arts, the bond between Curry and Green transcends basketball. It is a true brotherhood. The roots of this loyalty stretch all the way back to Green's rookie year, when he immediately proved he could impact winning in ways no other player on the roster could comprehend. But their connection was forged away from the arena lights. There is a famous story involving Curry, a die-hard Carolina Panthers fan, that illustrates this perfectly. Back in 2015, he mentioned he was flying his family up to Seattle to watch his team go into battle against the Seahawks. When someone warned him about the hostile environment and the notoriously aggressive Seattle fanbase, Curry simply smiled and replied, "It's fine. Draymond is coming with me." Sure enough, when the atmosphere in the stadium turned volatile, Green happily stepped into the role of enforcer and bodyguard. It gave Curry an early, unfiltered look at the depths of Green's loyalty to his inner circle. Green himself has often reflected on the unique chemistry that allows their relationship to thrive despite their opposing personalities. During a candid conversation on a podcast with Rich Kleiman, Green broke it down. "We understand exactly where we differ as men, and we never ask the other person to change who they are. There is absolutely zero pressure on me to try to be Steph Curry. We both understand that boundary, and we handle that dynamic with care." Curry has also opened up about this equilibrium, describing the emotional counterbalance they provide for one another. "I have said it since the day he arrived. He is a player who influences the outcome of a game regardless of what the box score reads. He has lived up to that standard his entire career as a definitive winner. But beyond the basketball, there are moments where I need him to lift me up emotionally because even I don't always have it. Sometimes my tank is empty and I need his fire. Other times he's running too hot and I need to be the one to cool him down. It's a perfect exchange." At the beginning, Green honestly never believed a friendship was in the cards for them. "We were looking at two human beings who were polar opposites in every conceivable way. You had Curry, baby-faced and incredibly understated in his demeanor, juxtaposed against Green, who was fiery, hot-tempered, and unapologetically loud. Curry was a product of an affluent, polished neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, while Green was forged in the fire, raised below the poverty line by a single mother in Saginaw, Michigan. One was a genius of offense, the other a gritty gladiator of defense. Yet, it didn't take much time for them to discover that these stark differences were actually wildly complementary pieces of a championship puzzle. So, when the internet analyzes a fleeting 7-second clip from a timeout and jumps to the conclusion that Stephen Curry wants Draymond Green exiled from Golden State, they are completely disregarding 14 years of documented brotherhood, and they are choosing to ignore direct, irrefutable quotes. They are sweeping aside every single sentiment Curry has ever expressed about this man publicly and on the official record. Now, that is not to say there aren't legitimate questions swirling about the team's long-term future. It doesn't mean the analytics aren't raising some serious red flags. It certainly doesn't imply the front office isn't strategizing about the next chapter. But the idea that Steph Curry is revealing a desire to push Draymond Green out, that is a narrative spun entirely from a facial expression caught during a frustrating blowout loss rather than from any words Curry has actually spoken. Steve Kerr, who has managed their dynamic for over a decade, framed the situation perfectly. Steph, to his immense credit, acts as the ultimate stabilizing force for the chaos that Draymond can bring. Consider the history. Green has had public explosions with head coaches, with Kevin Durant, and that infamous incident with Jordan Poole. Yet, he has never had a public falling out with Curry. Not once in 14 years. They were both born under the Pisces astrological sign, and their loyalty to one another is reciprocal. At the very core of their bond is a maniacal, shared pursuit of victory. So, where does this reality leave the Golden State Warriors right now? That viral timeout video was just a singular moment in time. The trade deadline was a tense, close call. The statistics without Curry on the floor are problematic, but the final history of this era hasn't been written just yet. Green holds a player option valued at $27.7 million for the 2026-2027 season. It is highly probable he will return for at least one more campaign. That player option places the power in Green's hands. And if he chooses to exercise it, which everyone expects him to do, that guarantees he will be wearing a Warriors uniform next season. The real question then shifts to whether the Warriors decide to revisit trade conversations once the summer arrives. What I find truly fascinating is that the organization seems to have crossed a psychological Rubicon regarding Draymond Green. Since he wasn't moved by the deadline, it wouldn't shock me at all if these discussions resurfaced during the summer, in the final year of his deal, potentially as part of a massive offer for Giannis or another destination. This is unlikely to be the final word on the Antetokounmpo rumors surrounding the Warriors, which means Green could very well find himself squarely in the center of trade negotiations when the offseason heat picks up. The pursuit of Giannis is not a closed chapter. The Bucks obviously still have their superstar for now. However, the Warriors are still desperate for a star-level addition to extend their window, and Green's contract remains the most mathematically viable piece for salary matching purposes. But there is a much larger philosophical question at play here, one that transcends any single roster spot. The Warriors must decide if they are chasing the nostalgia of the past or building a machine that fits the reality of 2026 basketball. This isn't about disrespecting what Draymond has built here. It is about acknowledging the harsh truth that the ecosystem making him elite only truly functions when the chef is on the floor bending defenses. Without that specific gravitational pull, Golden State needs to look faster, more spaced out, and significantly more adaptable. Steve Kerr has openly acknowledged the emotional difficulty of the transition Green is navigating. Kerr notes that Green's greatest superpower, his unshakable self-belief, is currently facing its ultimate test. As the biological clock of a legendary NBA career begins to wind down, you have to remember he's been an incredible winner and can still impact the game. Kerr has been very thoughtful about how Green's aging process is fundamentally different from other all-time greats. Every player declines differently based on their specific skill set. Generally speaking, highly skilled sharpshooters like Steph tend to age more gracefully because they can rely on their touch long after their athleticism fades. It is infinitely harder for a warrior like Draymond, who carved out his place in the league by simply being smarter, tougher, and more defensively dominant than everyone else. That comparison to Michael Jordan is quite revealing. Jordan extended his dominance by adding a lethal postgame and a fadeaway jumper. Green cannot simply manufacture a jump shot at 35 years old. His evolution has to be entirely cerebral, and it must fit within a system that is rapidly changing around him. So, it isn't as simple as Draymond just adding a low post move the way Michael Jordan did in his later years. It is really about deciphering the puzzle. Okay, how do we operate now without Steph or the other stars? What does this specific group need to execute, and how can I insert myself into that? Meanwhile, Green has pushed back hard against the narrative that he is obsolete without Curry. On his own podcast, The Draymond Green Show, he said, "People are always trying to invent these internet trends, but I'm pretty sure Steph Curry has missed far more games than I have. The theory just doesn't hold water." Cool story, though. I have played far too many games without Steph on the court for that theory to actually work. And to be fair, he is technically correct about the raw attendance numbers. As far as this current season is concerned, Green has certainly suited up for more contests than Curry. The all-time leading three-point shooter has played in just 39 games, while Green has appeared in 49. However, the on-court impact analytics remain a serious concern for anyone objectively evaluating this team. It has become undeniably evident that the gravity of Stephen Curry is the singular force that decides Draymond Green's fate, determining whether he operates as a brilliant tactical asset or becomes a glaring liability for the franchise. Sitting at a record of 31-29, clinging to 8th in the West, they are staring down the barrel of the play-in tournament, a far cry from the dominance they once commanded. There is a profound weight to how a legend navigates the twilight of their playing days, a test of character that goes far beyond the box score. I look closely at Draymond's demeanor during this turbulent stretch, specifically how he carries himself when the safety net is gone, and the roster's flaws are laid bare without Steph on the floor. Honestly, he is managing the adversity with a quiet, resilient sort of dignity. That is no small feat when your pride runs this deep, when you have defined greatness for a decade, only to suffer through nights where the magic just isn't there. Maintaining that mental fortitude is everything right now, because we need to separate the noise from the truth. Stephen Curry has never once voiced a desire to exile Draymond Green from Golden State. Those words have never left his lips. That viral clip from the timeout was simply a competitor in street clothes, forced to witness the collapse of a blowout defeat. That is the extent of it. This narrative that Curry is exhausted or finished with, Green is a castle built on sand, constructed entirely from projected body language rather than actual dialogue or reported facts. However, we cannot ignore the tangible reality that the Warriors front office has genuinely weighed the option of moving on from Green. It is a cold, hard fact that the analytics paint a grim picture when the two are separated, revealing a disconnect that simply cannot be overlooked. We know for certain that the conversation regarding Green's future in the Bay will reignite this summer, just as we know Green himself admitted. When you are not winning, everything becomes possible. He spoke with a candid vulnerability about the discussions that forced him to look in the mirror and accept that his path might eventually lead away from the only home he has known in this league. Yet, when you analyze the bond between Steph and Draymond, as Curry has articulated so poignantly in the past, it ultimately comes down to truly understanding the essence of a man and recognizing the unique, intangible fire he brings to the battle every single night. And frankly, you will not find a more powerful testament to brotherhood and teamwork that endures the years, simply because the foundation is built on absolute, unwavering trust. Side by side, they have been the architects of a dynasty, delivering 4 Bachelor of Arts championships to the Bay Area in 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2022. A span where Curry secured 2 MVP trophies, while Green cemented his legacy as the defensive heartbeat and emotional soul that made the entire machine function. They have racked up multiple All-Star nods together and revolutionized the sport itself by unleashing the Death Lineup, one of the most terrifying small ball units the game has ever seen. Now, we must accept the possibility that this golden era is fading into its final, melancholy chapter. The analytics may suggest this partnership has reached its expiration date when they aren't sharing the court, and management might make a ruthless call this offseason that alters the landscape forever. But the idea that Steph Curry is pushing Draymond Green out the door? That is nothing more than digital fiction, a storyline spun by the internet that exists only within the echo chamber of the internet. What lies on the horizon? Whether it is one last, glorious campaign to recapture the throne, or a heartbreaking departure that splits them apart, will be dictated by the cold calculus of the Warriors' front office, by the unforgiving nature of the open market, and by whether Draymond exercises his $27.7 million player option, not by a frustrated glance during a 28-point drubbing by the Lakers,